The patient has been flown in from abroad in a state of suspended animation in order to facilitate the healing of his recent limb transplants. He should be coming around any moment now.
It was a combination of having very, very, very little money and like my own sort of, naivete. But I'm happy with it because it's kitschy, it's funny, it still makes me laugh when I look at the costumes. They're insane. But I didn't really understand fabric as well as I do now, and I made things out of wool. It was like, I would have made everything out of stretch fabric. Obviously, it would have been more comfortable for the actors, but I did the best I could, and I like it. I look back on it incredibly fondly.
How do you feel about going into the race with a navigator you've never met?
You'll love Annie. She's a red-hot sex pot.
She better be a red-hot navigator.
The first time I worked for the Corman Company, I worked for Julie Corman, Roger's wife. How I got the job was Polly Platt, who was Peter Bogdanovich's wife, and they had done a movie for the Cormans. I worked for Polly Platt straight out of graduate school. And I finally got to a point with her where I said, I really want to work on a movie. And she said, well, call the Cormans, they'll hire anyone. So I did, and they did. They hired me to be the art director on Candy Striped Nurses. And from there, what happened was, and I did the titles, the opening credits for Candy Striped Nurses, because I had an animation sort of background too. And so I did Naughty Nurse animated titles. And then later, I also did the titles on Death Race, which most people don't know. But after I did art direction, which was including driving a truck, hauling furniture, doing a lot of stuff I really didn't enjoy doing, I kept looking at the costume person going, I want that job. So how I ended up working on Death Race was, New World Pictures was on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. New World was right across the street from a restaurant called The Old World. So I was eating lunch with some friends there, and Paul Bartel walked in, and people who I was with knew him from New York. And he said, I'm going to do this movie, Death Race 2000. And I said, let me do the costumes, please. And he said, okay, here's what it's about. Do some drawings, come see me. And that's what happened. I ended up working on Death Race 2000. I'd never done costumes before in my life.
Annie Smith.
Mr. Frankenstein.
The Frankenstein suit was described in the script as head-to-toe black leather. So that was kind of, we knew what that was. The zippers were my idea. It has all these zippers all over it that I thought would be a way of sort of like being the scars that Frankenstein had, like the Boris Karloff version of Frankenstein. But basically, my inspiration was just to I still work this way. Try and give each person a distinct character, a distinct way of dressing, and do it on a budget and use whatever I could get my hands on. I always tell people this story. The helmets, except for the one that David Carradine wears, the helmets were all made by me in my living room. And we got these free motorcycle helmets, basically, and then I had to sort of make them look different. And I just did it with a hot glue gun and, my bedazzler and whatever I could get my hands on. And I had to have Roger and Paul come to my little apartment, my crummy little apartment, and look at these helmets to approve them. It was mortifying, but they liked them. David Carradine was in his kung fu phase, the poster boy for hippiedom. First thing that came out of his mouth when I met with him was, I'm not wearing leather. I said, okay. And you have to remember, I'm a kid, I'm 23, I've never designed a movie before in my life. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And he goes, I wanna wear neoprene. I said, you'll die. It's really, really, really hot. I want to wear neoprene. I said, I'll find something that'll work. And so I found this synthetic leather and went to Western Costume, had them make up the costume. We went to fit David on the lot at Warner Brothers in his trailer from Kung Fu. His girlfriend was there. He took one look, and you have to picture, Paul Bartel was there too. I was a kid and I was really scared. He took one look at this costume, ripped it into shreds in front of me, and told me to go fuck myself. I don't know if you could put that, but he did. And I went stumbling out of his trailer and threw myself into the bushes at Warner Brothers and cried hysterically. I thought, this is the first costume design job I've ever had and the last one, because I'm going to get fired now and my career is over. So I had to drive the tailors back to Western Costume, sobbing the entire way. And when I got to my apartment, Paul Bartel was pacing up and down in front of my apartment. I went, now I'm going to get fired. I walked out of my car, I walked up to Paul, and he says, I don't know what we're going to do. I can't work with this guy. He's impossible. I can't handle him. I said, what should we do? And he said, let's call Roger. So we went into my house and we called Roger, and Paul put me on the phone, and I went, tell him the whole story. I go, and then he told me to go fuck myself. And Roger says, and I thought he was going to fire me immediately, and he said, well, he's fired. And I was like, he's fired? Oh my God. I couldn't believe it. So the next day, they fired him. No one worked. And then the next day was Saturday, and I was at home, and I lived in this little bungalow in West Hollywood with a glass front door. And I was having my girlfriends over, regaling them with this horrible story, and there's a knock on my door. And I look out, and I see David Carradine and his dog and his guitar at my front door. So I was scared, so I kind of go to the front door and let him in. He's like, hey man, I really just wanted to come over and, apologize. I thought maybe I could sing you a couple of songs. I'm like, okay. So he came in, sat down on my kitchen table in the middle of our lunch, and played his guitar and sang for a couple hours. It was insane. It was just insane. And then I'd had to do the movie with him. But the end of the story, it's a good ending. I found this material called Wet Look, which is kind of a jersey that they spray with paint so it looks like leather. And I had the costumes made out of that. And every review of the movie started with David Carradine clad in head-to-toe leather. So it's like, who won?
If you just stop trying to kill me for a minute, I need your help.
How can you possibly expect me to help you?
I don't think any of the other characters' costumes were actually described in the script at all. They just were. Like, Sylvester Stallone was a gangster. His name was Killer Joe Viterbo. Mary Warrenoff was a cowgirl. Her name was Calamity Jane. One of the people that wrote, I think Marty Cove's partner was Cleopatra. I mean, they were, they were what they were. In fact, here's a good story about the Cleopatra thing. This woman was very, 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 very tiny. And I had no money, so I went to Western Costume and I was rummaging around. And this is in the old days when you could get really amazing things at Western Costume. And I found an old Elizabeth Taylor Cleopatra dress that I used in Death Race on this woman who played Cleopatra. And then, I went and got some, cheesy, casting of an asp, glued it onto the front of her helmet, and that was her costume, basically. But Mary Warrenoff's costume I got at North Beach Leather. It was this fabulous halter with feathers and beads and stuff. I mean, really, it was a pastiche. It was a combination of rented things and, bought things, and then Simone Griffith, who played the co-pilot for David Carradine, her outfit I made, and it was so much fun. At Western, they had walls full of buttons, drawers with all these buttons. I found these buttons that must have been from the Buck Rogers era. They were literally celluloid buttons. And I based the whole costume on these buttons I found. So, and I made her a green jumpsuit with these goofy Buck Rogers buttons on them. You know, that was how you know, it's like I say, it was a real pastiche of different things.
Got to give the fans something to talk about. It's my obligation as a national hero.
Frankenstein scores now. Does that score count, Harold?
An interesting point, Junior.
I would say the most challenging thing for me really was that I had never done costumes before in my life, really, in my life, you know. And I didn't even know you needed doubles. I was that big of a baby, a naive rube, and I didn't make enough doubles of anything. I think there were 3 Frankenstein outfits, 2 for David and 1 for the stunt person. And I remember spending a lot of time running after David with a needle and thread going, wait, let me just, you've torn, wait, just a second. It was like that. And really, it was just 2 people. Our whole wardrobe crew was me and 1 other person. And we had to dress all the principal actors, and we had to drive the truck that the wardrobe was in, which was a passenger van. And we had to do everything. I mean, we had to do the laundry. We had to do everything. It was insane. And I really did not know what I was doing. If you could see the continuity book from this movie, you would die laughing. Because I didn't know. You know, I was trying to figure out how to do wardrobe at the same time as I was doing this movie. I would say that was the biggest challenge, aside from dealing with David. New World Pictures had a totally fabulous, sort of a postgraduate course feel. I'm still friends with tons of the people that I met there, are still really good friends of mine, and I always called it Corman's College of Obscure Knowledge. You know, earn while you learn. And that was the vibe, you know. It was like they would indeed hire anybody, and they would let you make mistakes, and they would let you learn, and you just kept working and working, which in those days, they didn't really have any way for you to learn your craft except for to work. And you know, you couldn't work on union shows. They were the only non-union game in town. It was a fabulous, fabulous place. I loved working there. The pay was terrible, the working conditions were terrible, but it was wonderful. It was a wonderful place. There was nothing bad about it.
I plan to pension off the secret police, restore free elections, end minority privilege.
I'm fundamentally still the same person I was when I worked at New World, and I am known somewhat throughout the industry for being very, very good with money. And I think that stems from my days at New World. I can really pinch a penny, and that's Roger Corman training, hardcore all the way.